Okay, so I know usually we start every episode by asking some questions to audience members. First it's like kind of a shtick to get you interested in what we're doing and thinking about the topic and maybe thinking about the guest and what might the guest be bringing as a way to keep you engaged. And Jim and I were talking right before the show, and I think, speaking only for myself, that in the production of the show every week, I think I lost a little bit of the whole idea that Jim and I are here for you. We're here to serve our listeners. We're here to serve this community. And again, kind of in the minutia of the week to week, the grind, yeah, it can get to be a grind. Sometimes it's easy to lose that. So we thought it would be kind of cool for you folks to be asking us in this particular episode. And I think it's something we're going to be doing a little bit more of, right, Jim, on a regular basis. Like, ask us anything. Jim and I have produced over 60 episodes over the year and a half, and we've talked to some amazing people. And Jim, I've learned so much from our guests.
Yeah.
Like, it's sometimes drinking from the fire hose.
Yeah.
And so we want to be able to like bring that back to you. So, and if you're willing to put your questions in the chat, you just might be able to win some free merch. We've got some hoodies and baseball caps and some other stuff that we've cooked up, and we'd love to be able to give that away to you because it's our way of saying thank you, right? Thank you to you. Because honestly, if it wasn't for you, there'd be no reason for us to show up. Right, Jim?
Couldn't say it better myself. Yep. Thanks so much. We're excited to give some stuff away. I think there's going to be some good, almost like flashback today of, there's some questions that we've been asked that, I mean, Adam, you and I were talking right before the show that immediately if it's someone asks a question, we go, oh, we talked about on this episode with this person about that exact, scenario or issue or challenge or whatever. So I think there's going to be some good flashback, probably some shout outs. Try to get some things to be good.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really great point that you were making about this whole thing about, as I'm reading some of the questions that were submitted, I'm thinking about specific folks that we had on the show and like, geez, and we've just got another one. Okay. How do you get the power of attorney amendment as well? Since when alcohol is a disease or disability. And that, I think, is a Chinese finger trap, but we'll get to that in a minute. Welcome to another episode of Turning the Table. My name is Adam Lamb of Chef Life Coaching, and I'm here with my co-host, Jim Taylor of Benchmark 60. Jim, it's so nice to be with you again, man.
Every week, it's amazing that, well, like you said, a year and a half ago, you called me one day and, we're going to start a podcast. And I don't think I even own I don't have a microphone. I don't know anything about this, but it's been a great journey and lots of good discussion. So I'm excited to get into it today.
Yeah. As always, we're dedicated to bringing you solutions to the hospitality industry's most persistent challenges. And some of the questions that were submitted kind of bears that. And I think there's a couple themes that we'll be able to dig into.
Yeah.
Please remember to share this episode. Follow us on your favorite podcast player, and please leave us a review. Links to the videos and other things discussed in the show can be found in the comments and show notes. And if you'd like to partner with us on Turning the Table and get in front of over 4,000 progressive hospitality professionals every week, you can DM either myself or Jim Taylor. And we'll get to all your questions and some of the answers right after these messages.
Welcome to Turning the Table, the most progressive weekly podcast for today's food and beverage industry, featuring staff-centric operating solutions for restaurants in the hashtag New Hospitality Culture. Join Jim Taylor of Benchmark 60 and Adam Lamb as they turn the tables on the prevailing operating assumptions of running a restaurant in favor of innovative solutions to our industry's most persistent challenges. Thanks for joining us. And now, on to the show.
So we've got a couple things to talk about first before we get into questions. And the first thing, as always, is we love to partner with our friends at chowco.org. And so we asked the question of each other on the show, how are you, really? And so as you join the chat, I'd like for you folks to be letting us know how you're doing in this particular moment, and just take a moment to just check in. And we love the meat thermometer thing. So rare, medium, medium well. Well done. And so you can post the temperatures in the chat. And really, the only point to this is we just want to be real with one another. Like, we'll leave that all the bullshit fronting up to someone else. But for right now, we can be real with one another. So, Jim, I think I'm just going to come straight out and say medium rare.
Medium rare.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, not that there's a right or wrong answer, but
right.
Kelly, also medium rare. Good to hear about that. We're gonna talk more about you in a minute, I think. So excited to see you in the chat. I'm definitely somewhere between, and this isn't typical for me, but interesting that it's like Timon said, medium or medium well. It just to give some context, I'm kind of one of those always going a million miles an hour with lots of different stuff on the go.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting scenario right now for me that I feel like I've got a million balls in the air. All of them are sort of 50% right now. So it's just kind of, that sort of trying to be patient, a little, maybe trying to be present, trying to make sure that we're getting some things completed. It's a bit of an interesting feeling for me. It's not normal, but it's good to be present in it. So who else? We've got a few different, people commenting here.
Absolutely. Someone's saying, which is interesting, better than ever as truth prevails. And friend Kelly Featheringham is saying medium rare, which is fantastic that you're here, Kelly, because we get to talk about you next. So for those of you who don't know, Kelly Featheringham has been on the show several times. And a couple days ago, she just released her second book, What is Your Ripple Effect? It went live as a Kindle for 99 cents. And the really cool thing to see is that currently the book is at number 124 in her category. And I got to think that we can get this community together. It'd be really, really easy to push her to number one and give her a little bit of love and assistance, because who doesn't like to be a bestseller in their category? And having read the book before it came out, it really kicks ass. It's a really great book. And not only that, Kelly's decided that she's actually going to do What's Your Ripple Effect virtual launch party on Monday. And so I'm going to be putting those links in the chat so that you can buy the Kindle book, join her on the virtual launch party, because as I said in the foreword that I wrote for the book, she's just not resting on the laurels of her last book, which, kicked my ass. And I think I could say for Jim as well, Mastering Your ABCs.
Yeah.
But she didn't just like retread the old stuff. She broke new ground. And, there's this whole idea of like everything we say and do, all our actions, they have a consequence and they leave ripples in our wakes. And so the question I think that she's asking us is like, to be present to the question, like what kind of effect do you want to have? And so I just thank her for her work. I'm really glad you're here. And I'm going to be putting those links in the chat. And finally, for the last announcements, is that I will be joining 9 other hospitality professionals, thought leaders, really. Kyle and Sarah is going to be there. A bunch of the people that we've actually had on the show are going to be at the Restaurant Success Summit in Tucson, Arizona this month, October 23rd and 25th. Seats are still available. And you can actually get $300 off regular price with this link. So please think about coming out and join us. It is going to be a really kick-ass event. I'm really looking forward to it. I actually get to do a presentation on it's okay to not be okay. And another one around emotional intelligence and hospitality operations, and how folks can actually increase that IQ with some very simple steps and become, not only a preferred employer, but the preferred boss that everybody just wants to work with, kind of like how you were, Jim.
Oh, I think everybody strives to be that. But sorry, so you said there's a link that's going to show up in the notes that's for a $300 discount?
Yep, I'm doing that right now.
Maybe I need to go to Tucson on the 23rd. It's
going to be great, man. It's going to be great. And I think the only Sean Walchef was supposed to be there and had to cancel at the last minute. So it kind of gives you the caliber of the speakers who are going to be there, and it's all organized by our good friend, the restaurant coach, Donald Burns.
Should be good.
Yep.
So we should. What was the first question that we had submitted? I can't remember what it was, but there was. Was it about technology?
It was, and let me just go there. So we had Alex Mumford ask, do you see our industry moving away from the full service cycle in the next 5 years or so to a more tech-led approach? For example, QR codes on tables to order, and servers become more managers and busters of their own section instead of servers, a little like the model laid out by Bar Taco, amongst others. And if so, what impact do you feel that would have on our team's well-being? I feel there is a potential to remove the hospitality from our hospitality industry, but I do feel it's leaning in this way. Anyway, so, is there anything to do about it? Do we just kind of like witness the kind of slow roll of this accident happening in front of us, and I'll be rubbernecking? So, Jim, I think I want to let you take that first one.
Well, I mean, Bar Taco is doing some really cool stuff. I mean, Anthony Valletta, the president, was on our show in the spring and talked us through some of that. They're doing some amazing work in that space with, this idea that there are lots of different ways to accomplish some of the things that I think the industry is trying to accomplish.
Sure.
So I don't know. My take on that one is that I don't think it's going to ruin hospitality. I think it's going to change hospitality in certain ways. But I think the upside to concepts like Bar Taco or models that do what we're talking about here is, I think it actually might add a level of increased accountability and almost professionalism in some of those businesses where people feel as though they're more responsible for the overall business when they're in charge of a different sort of type of section, right? Not that there's anything wrong with serving tables or there's anything unprofessional about that.
Sure.
But if now I'm in a more of a position of management, maybe I'm on salary, maybe my compensation is changing. I think it's going to help to shift this it's not a real job mentality that sometimes exists in our industry.
That's an interesting perspective. I was also thinking about a lot of things that came up during this last year, where some large chains were starting to move to labor-saving devices. Mm-hmm. So there's one out there that's actually using this technology to develop and to make, huge amounts of guacamole from whole avocados. You just toss it in there, it takes care of itself. Yeah. And I've seen those commercials with those kids over those bowls, man. It looks like they're working awful hard for that stuff. Yeah. And I got to think that from, an industry's perspective, and Matthew, I don't want you to think that we're not going to get to your question, because we will, because we're seeing it in the chat, and I think it's worthy of a conversation. But if you don't have anybody coming in to apply for your position in the kitchen, prep cook, mm-hmm. then either you're going to lean on your suppliers to bring more quote unquote chef ready products, which will then bring down your need to hire staff and then make it permanently depressed in that area. Or the other side of that is that, more and more robotics is going to start taking over, like this avocado machine. Yeah. I actually invested in a company called Miso. They're developing robotic cooking systems for airports, where typically it's very difficult to find qualified staff and keep them. So there's only two ways we can go with this. We can either embrace the fact that we're always going to be short-staffed now. I mean, I remember when sous vide came out, nobody wanted to touch it because it was somehow a bastardization of the craft. But once everybody got their arms around it and understood what the technology provided, I mean, you were bragging on it like you love your sous vide.
Yeah, and I think too that whether it's an avocado machine or there was QR code was part of that question, right? There's lots of debate about QR code. I'm pretty passionate about QR code, and I actually think QR code should stay in restaurants as often as possible if
Yep.
it fits the model. So I don't know if white tablecloth fine dining should go QR code, but pretty much everything else I think should. And there's sure, it might change a little bit of the hospitality thing, but going back to talking to Anthony from Bar Taco about this, his comment about what the role of the person helping the customer was in relation to the QR code, I thought was really good, because it doesn't remove the hospitality of it. The job of the person who's in charge of the section was, number one, make sure they know how to use the QR code, right? There's some service and hospitality associated with that. And number two, he just said their only other job is to make sure they have an incredible experience.
Yeah.
So you're not removing the hospitality, but the amount of information and detail and data and strategic opportunity that exists in QR codes, I think that gets missed sometimes. So lots of ways we could go on that one.
Well, it's funny that you should bring up QR codes, Jim, because I've been working with an organization in Canada called the Food Venture Program that sells live food startup programs to basically small business organizations in the States. And so this particular cycle, I'm leading like 7 of the 9 classes. And yesterday's presentation was around menu design. And the last question that I wanted to ask is QR codes dead now that the pandemic is over? And my point to everybody was like, no. I mean, QR codes existed before then. They might have been on some packaging, but nobody really paid any attention.
No.
Right now I'm looking for a way to use a QR code to capture more reviews, because I recognize that if I can make it really simple and someone hit that, it makes it so much easier for the end user. And what I've come to understand intimately about our industry is that if it takes more than 2 clicks or 2 minutes, people don't have time for it.
Yeah.
So the easier, like the more fluid we can make the dining experience, whether that's ordering drinks from the table from a QR code or using them in certain areas, I think it's a technology worth embracing. And while I wouldn't advocate, to open up restaurants like they're doing in the West Coast, where it's a fully automated burger joint, and I think the only person that's in there is running the register, and even they could probably get away with that. And this emergent technology of QR codes and self-help kiosks are even showing up in assisted living facilities.
Oh yeah.
And I would think that there is, in environments like that where folks are a little bit older, that they would be a little bit more reticent. There might be a little bit more of the learning curve. But they love it. They love it because it feeds their sense of independence.
For sure.
So the whole psychological part of that, it was different when everybody, was locked down and this was the only way that you could actually get service. But now if we can pivot that as a add-on or an adjunct to the service model, and I don't think it's going to be like, I mean, Alex certainly has a certain degree of concern when he says, and we've talked about this on this show about, we really have to be careful about bringing on AI technology and things of that sort, because if it's taking us away from the guest, then we're failing. If it's giving us more time to be on the floor and be more present, then that's probably something that we should take a look at.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And I think the QR code thing, we should keep moving here, but I think the QR code thing is going to come up again in another question.
Yep. And so I want to make sure that I am addressing Matthew, because Matthew, your first comment, I'll throw it up if I can see it in the chat, is the one that really touched my heart and seemed to be that spoke a lot of truth, which was this comment right here. Was this 503 disability insurance is not something that I would ever consider in the fact, and I'm burnt. So I don't know if you're speaking about physically or emotionally, but I certainly know that in a society where it feels like more and more people are having less control over the data and that there is risk everywhere, I could certainly dig what you're saying. And as gateways for information, as hospitality providers, we have a great deal of responsibility of protecting that information. I would never go to a doctor that's not HIPAA compliant or is not using HIPAA compliant software, right? And as a coach, I had to shop around a lot to look for the platform that would actually allow me to protect my clients' privacy such that it wouldn't get out on a breach. So if that's not hitting the point, I would just encourage you to kind of relanguage it again for me so I understand it. You're saying we need to use QR codes with no code that is accessible to all of the users' information. Totally get that. And it seems like as the world becomes more integrated, that there's more opportunity for misadventure by folks who want to take advantage of that. So thank you for your comments. I really appreciate it. And let's get on to our friend Kristen Marvin, again, who we've had on the show, and she is really on fire. And it's amazing that a lot of the content that she's putting out, and her podcast goes live today. No hesitations.
Yeah.
No hesitations podcast. Can't wait to see that. So her question is, given that staffing levels in the hospitality business, okay, here we go back again with staffing levels.
Yep.
Are back to pre-pandemic levels, with the exception of full-service restaurants. What innovative approaches have you seen full-service restaurants making when it comes to hiring and retaining staff? Oh, Jim, that is your question right there, baby.
Well, the hiring part, I mean, it's tough no matter what, right? I mean, we could answer this question for Kristen in lots of different ways about the hiring part. I mean, you could go the technology route and talk about, groups like FlipTable and some of these companies that are in the employee acquisition space. We could talk about the retention side of things and, protecting employee workload and some of the things that we've talked about a lot on this show in the past. I think that the best way that I would answer this for full service restaurants looking to improve things like retention, because if they can improve retention and chip away at the hiring thing, eventually they're going to get back to where they want to be full staff with a full staff. Things like the proactive approach to retention are becoming more and more important than they ever have been, right? Retention in the hospitality industry used to be a staff member comes to you and says, I think I'm going to quit. And we go, what can we do to get you to stay? Right?
Yeah.
Please don't leave. Here's more money. Here's a better position. Here's a better station. We'll train you on something new. We try to keep them engaged and hopefully they don't move on.
Yeah.
Retention in the new hospitality culture that, we talk about needs to be far more proactive, far more, here's what we're doing to protect you from undue stress, burnout, anxiety, right? All of those things that we know cause turnover. And, the advice that we give to operators every single day, which is sometimes a tough pill to swallow, is in order to make that actually work, sometimes they need to shrink their business on purpose.
Isn't that interesting?
Shrink it for 90 days in order to grow over the next 12, 24, 36 months, right? Shrink the section that you're giving somebody, shrink the number of orders that you're allowing to come in to the kitchen, protect the people that you have so that they will stick around. And, that's one of the reasons why we spend so much time talking about workload. You connect that to the way that professional sport leagues operate.
Yeah.
And I've talked about this ad nauseum sometimes, right? Professional sport leagues have load management strategies in place in order to protect their biggest assets from injury and burnout.
Jim,
so that they can produce.
That is something that really, I have been advocating for a different mental approach to our physical well-being in the industry. Like, why aren't we treating ourselves like world-class athletes? I mean, we are.
For sure. Professionals, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. But the professional sports figures, they're using every single possible technology that they can figure out to recover quickly, to heal their muscles quickly so that they can come back next week and do the same thing. And People used to make fun of me because I'd be on the Chef Life radio podcast going, I got 2 words for you: compression socks. Like, let's just start there.
Ice bath. Yeah. Totally.
Then we get ice baths, or ice plunges, steam, sauna, hyperbaric chambers. There's a million and one technologies out there that can be brought to bear. And really, it's all about us, being able to bring the best of us forward consistently to be in service, not only to the guests, but also to each other.
Yeah. And I think too, the biggest roadblock that we find with this, that I talk to people about every day about this, is that it's really scary to say, wait a second, you want me to limit the number of customers I'm serving? You want me to limit the number of orders that I'm allowing? Because that's revenue and that's everything, right? Yep. But the crazy thing, and we see this happen over and over and over again, is the first thing that we see happen in connection to unsustainable workload levels is declining customer spend.
Right.
So now the team is working harder to sell less. They're burning out, their stress is up, all those things. And you know what? At the end of the day, think about, from a retention perspective, you go to the chef and you say, hey, I know we're serving 200 covers every dinner right now, and it's really tough to deliver. The food quality maybe isn't as good as it could be. The ticket times are long, but we've got all these people lined up at the door. Like, we got to make it happen. And you're turning through people, right? You're burning through staff. Well, if you just said, we're going to limit it to 150 covers a night, can you guys handle that? Food quality goes up, ticket times improve. You maybe get, the extra turn here and there, and the whole business improves. But it's a tough pill to swallow sometimes. Anyway, I can rant about that all day.
Well, because there was so much, so much of the pandemic was about this desperation of, like, how are we going to recover this revenue? How are we ever going to dig ourselves out of the hole? So that when the doors were flung open, everybody charged in, and it was almost like managers were just kind of, okay, like, we're going to take it and we're going to live through it. It'll be another day, but for right now, we just got to put up and take it. And I can't tell you, Jim, our conversations have so influenced, like, the way that I'm teaching this course and in my coaching, because this whole idea about, like, being able to proactively manage workload, and that the first indication is the customer spend or the customer behavior going down. Like, that's the number one thing, because I can't get the second drink because the server's been double sat. There's nobody to clean the tables, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We know what that looks like from, we have to do is stand at the hostess stand, or from the pass and actually look the other way and see it happening right in front of us.
So we had an example the other day, and on that.
No, go ahead.
On that note, we had an example the other day about a business we were looking at that had definitely had workload challenges. They were operating in this unsustainable workload level. Table turns were 9 minutes on average to clear, reset, and seat a table.
Wow.
Okay, so think about that for a second. They added people to the schedule on purpose. Now, this is in a business that has enough people to be able to do that. But they added people to the schedule on purpose, right? Which often people would go, well, that's going to make my labor costs go up. Well, it could if nothing else changed in connection to that. But they were able to get their table flip times down to 4 minutes. So now they sat an extra 10 groups every day while they were going through that process. Now their flip times are faster, the room looks cleaner, the vibe's better, they're serving more customers, their sales go up, and their labor costs actually went down by lowering workload on purpose.
Yep.
Anyway, could rant about that all day.
Right.
Very
and
important.
So the other part of the equation that I think doesn't get talked about enough was something that we were talking about last week with the CEO of Hattie James Creamery.
Mm-hmm.
She brought up a great point, and, like, her coaching is, you got to be really, really thoughtful about the hiring process.
Yeah.
Not only do you actually need a really good job description, hiring profile, but then you have to think outside the box on the questions that you want to ask, and then do that consistently.
Yeah.
Because if you're not, like, that's the first place that you'll actually get to be proactive about the type of staff that you have on hand is in the hiring process. But too often we're so desperate to get people in that we're just bringing them in, God, oh, thank God someone's here, right?
Yeah.
And we'll deal with that crap later.
Yeah.
But the truth is once they're in the door, they're in the door. And some folks, trying to get rid of them is like trying to get rid of a dug in tick. And meanwhile, they're affecting everybody else in the crew.
Yeah.
So I know that episode was really great and had so many nuggets in there.
Yeah, Claire has some really good things to say.
Because she's clear that, if you're not getting it at the beginning, you're certainly not going to get it at the end.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So
the other part of that question that Kristen had was about driving lunch traffic, right?
Yeah, she did. She asked also any tips on driving lunch traffic for all those downtown restaurants who are still struggling post-pandemic.
So this is where I thought, the QR code thing comes back up again.
Mm-hmm.
Because if a restaurant is using a QR code, and I was literally talking to an operator about this last week, they're using a QR code. So they have the opportunity to have who's coming in, what's the demographic, where do they live, where do they work, all of this information about, not the absolute individual, but the demographic of clientele.
Yep. Repeat
business, what did they order, all of these different things. And there's incredible opportunity to use that information to retarget people to come back.
Yep.
And we've had obviously lots of good partnership with the Vocalize over the last year. I mean, that's what they do, right? I mean, they're so good at taking that information and driving local marketing, in order to drive traffic. So lunch business, dinner business, late night, whatever it might be.
And the other thing that comes to mind for me is, Jeff Alexander from Wow. I mean, I knew he was a hardworking dude. I mean, the success of their operation is proof pudding of that. And he said two things that were really profound for me. Number one was this idea of coming from a metaphysical point of we don't have any money, right? Yeah. And if we don't have any money, how else are we going to do this? Yeah. So they did it guerrilla style. I mean, they would pack up the van with a bunch of their bows, and they went down to the Apple store when it first opened in Chicago, because they knew that the staff was going to be so busy that they probably wouldn't get lunch. Mm-hmm. So they just handed out bows to the staff, not necessarily the people coming in. But his point was really simple and profound, which is you got to get your product everywhere. And in downtown corridors, you have associated service businesses, clothing stores. I mean, you've got certainly other restaurants, but typically nobody pays any attention to, the retailers, right? And that's a great inroad, because there might be somebody standing at a register, waiting to get their iPhone scanned. And it's like, hey, any place close here that's good for lunch? Comes up right away. So there's these kind of, it's funny because I think about them as being non-traditional, but they're about as traditional as they can get, because that's the way it was done for so many years before AI and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, it makes me think back in the day, we used to do what we called them coffee drops.
Right.
But we were a full service restaurant with all kinds of different stuff on the menu, but we would literally order from the broadline distributor a couple extra coffee urns and cookies. We didn't have cookies on the menu, but we just ordered cookies that they were par baked and we could cook them off quick in the morning. Mm-hmm. And once a week we would go out and go to 2 or 3 local businesses and literally leave a coffee urn and a thing of cookies and say, have a great day. Here's where we're from. Here's some, business cards or a promo thing or whatever. Mm-hmm. We'll be back later to get our coffee urn, but enjoy the cookies.
Yeah.
And all it was a gesture, a nice thing to do from another local business, right? So because we weren't trying to serve them our food at 9 o'clock in the morning, we just wanted to be on their mind.
Yep.
And it worked.
Yeah, I think I made a point to Jeff about this idea of like having all your not your serviceware, but your to-go containers logoed, so that you open up the refrigerator the day later and you're reminded again. And he's like, yeah, not so much. Like he was looking for more proactive, like active, being in front of the customer or where your potential customer is. And to probably finish that off is, I come back to Jensen Cummings' statement about, if you're a restaurant, if you're a chef, if you are a caterer, you are a food and beverage operation and a media company. And if you are not taking advantage of short form video and putting those videos where your potential associates and or customers are, you're missing the boat, because those are kind of, and I understand that the phone is highly technical, but to me, it's kind of a low tech way, right?
Yeah.
Take a little video of the staff having some fun sitting in the dining room or getting the kitchen together or preparing a dish. And hint to the chefs, forget about the static food dishes, food shots. Those are only for other chefs, right? It's like food porn. Okay. But the customer is looking for an interaction. They're looking for authenticity. They're not looking for a polished look or a polished speech. They actually want to see people like flub up a little bit, because then I can see who you are, man. Then I can see your heart. You're not a robot, right? You're not some polished dude trying to win me over. Yeah. You're just a regular person, just like me. And why wouldn't I want to come and spend my money with you? So there's, the cool thing is that there's lots of different opportunities for operators to capitalize on these trends, and the trends are not going away. We talked to lots of folks this year about short form videos and how they're being incorporated more and more and more in training for operations, which I think is really cool. The only thing I see trouble with is, I come from a time when I left the house at noon and I told my mom, I'll call you in 2 hours. I meant it. And if I didn't call in 2 hours and it's now 3 hours, nobody panicked, because nobody had cell phones. The only way I could call her is by going to a house or payphone or whatever. Yeah. And so as the technology got better, the instantaneous communication became more and more important. And there's a certain amount of anxiety. Like, if you don't pick up the phone when I call, then there's got to be something wrong, right? And then I start worrying. So, each one of these technologies comes with its own inherent risk, and yet it does provide us an opportunity to kind of step outside of ourselves and not necessarily be, for lack of a better word, a victim of our circumstance.
Yeah, I think it's important with all this technology to really stop and think about what's the concept, what is the upside to using the technology. Yep. Does it fit the concept and the brand? But also be aware of the, to some of the questions about, will it change hospitality? Not to beat on the QR code. Sure, it could change some of the factors or the pieces of hospitality, but there are also ways to continue to incorporate with technology, how to take good care of the guests.
Yeah, that should be the ultimate goal of the technology. I guess that's a great litmus test, right?
Yeah. Does
this increase my opportunity to be in relationship with my guest or not, or staff, right? Because as the newer generations are coming up through the industry, we're hearing more and more that they don't want a leader, they don't want a boss, they want a mentor, they want someone who views them as a whole and hale human being and treats them that way. And I think it's important for some of us who have perhaps held different views in the past to smarten the fuck up, because if we don't, you don't stand in the middle of the river when it's trying to push you over, man, because it will drown you. So yeah, part of it is pivoting so that you can benefit from this particular technology or viewpoint or perspective and leverage it such that you've got a great working environment. People love coming to work there. People love coming to eat there. And I know it's not as trite and true as that. And I don't necessarily want to get off the topic, but I'm just curious, Jim, was there any other questions that popped for you that were submitted?
Well, there were some other ones about, that, and I don't even know if we're going to have to do this again, because I don't even know if we have enough time to get through all of these. But There were some questions that came in from some operators in California about how do I, what do you recommend that I do to combat this $20 minimum wage that's coming? The bill was approved and that's coming hot and heavy. I was talking to an operator yesterday from a Chick-fil-A franchisee in California, wondering about, what are we supposed to do here? So there's definitely some stuff around that. And, I think we actually are going to need to do another episode on this with some of these follow-up questions.
Well, what I think it would be really cool is if we kind of make this, every fourth episode or every sixth episode.
Yeah. Good idea.
So I mean, I think it would serve me because again, it kind of gives me an opportunity to kind of like get grounded with a lot of this information that, you know, like I said, sometimes during the show, it's like, you know, drinking from the fire hose. And so to be able to talk about it parse it out a little bit, and talk about it, I think would certainly do me a lot of good. And I'm pretty clear that some of our listeners would appreciate that as well. Because we want to be able to know what's on their mind, what bees in their bonnet, you know, the things that they're concerned about. You know, it's, you know, we're here because we want to be able to provide solutions, different perspective. Sometimes it's not as easy as just changing your mind, especially when you got a really well practiced habit of being a certain way. But at least a space like this allows us to even get in the discussion of like what it would look like to actually change that. And that's what I really dig. And that's why I really appreciate, you know, you're my partner with this, because the conversations always leave me more full and less a little bit kind of, what the hell am I going to do? It's great to get grounded with somebody, you know, not to say that we have to think the same ways, but to understand that, like, you know, this too will pass. It goes for the bad things and the good things. So we got to hold it all loosely. And so, so I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody who showed up on the chat, asked the questions. Kristen Marvin, Alex Mumford, certainly Kelly Featheringham. Now you're going to have to be on our show again for 3 more times explaining your book to us. And I definitely want to say, Matthew Biondi, thanks so much for being with us. And there's more to parse out. So if you're willing to hang with us, we're willing to hang with you. And so, again, we've got the chat, the links in the chat for Kelly's brand new book, her event coming up on Monday, and for the event in Tucson, the restaurant, the Successful Restaurant, or the Restaurant Success Summit with Donald Burns and 9 other amazing speakers. And of course, at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time today, 10/12/23, Kristen Marvin's podcast, No Hesitations, will be coming out. We'll actually go live. So it's an opportunity to subscribe early, get in there, leave lots of comments. You know, on Spotify, now you can do polls. So when you actually listen to a podcast on Spotify, there's usually a question afterwards. And they're making it a very, very dynamic place to host and interact, host the podcast, and also interact with our community. So I want to just be on record and say, bring it, because we would love to have some more connection, some more conversation. And it doesn't always have to be agreeing with us, because that's usually where the great shit happens, right?
Couldn't agree more. Well said.
Jim, any final words? Anything that anything that you want to kind of land on other than a deep sense of gratitude?
No, you know what? I just appreciate connecting like this every week, and lots of good people, you know, asking questions. And it's really cool to see the alignment in the industry. You know, a lot of people are asking similar things, which means that, you know, we're swimming as a school of fish here, right? And I think we can all head in the same direction as a community, and that's all good, right? So it's good to show up for the Adams.
You know, to a certain extent, you know, we have made this mess, and so it's incumbent upon us to come together and fix it. Because if we're waiting for someone else to do it, it's not going to happen. And there's a lot of amazing solutions and providers out there who are like showing up, saying, "Hey, let's try this, let's try this, let's try this."
Yeah.
And not saying that they're all great, because they won't be all great. But if we have enough options, we're going to find something that fits. And so I want to say thanks for hanging in there with us. It's been an amazing 1.5 years. We're still here, and we want you to be here. So let us know how we're doing. Send us an email, call us, whatever you want to do, we're here. So I just want to say thank you very much from Jim and I, and we will be back next week with another episode of Turning the Table. And by the way, next week, I think we have Nina with us from Underbelly Hospitality from Texas, right?
Yeah, and they've won some really cool awards. That'll be a really good discussion.
Dude, they're doing some really amazing stuff, and they have no hesitation about closing restaurants. Like if it's underperforming, if it's not doing very well, like they're doing this whole reimagining of their company that's really dynamic, and it's got their community really lit up. So really looking forward to a conversation with her. So join us next week here on Turning the Table, next Thursday, 12 noon Eastern time, and be well and do good.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Turning the Table with me, Adam Lamb, and Jim Taylor. We're on a mission to change the food and beverage industry for the better by focusing on staff mental health, physical and emotional well-being, by proactively measuring and managing staff workloads. Join other hospitality professionals co-creating the hashtag New Hospitality Culture by subscribing to our weekly newsletter at www.turningthetablepodcast.com/news. In every edition, you'll find innovative solutions ready to test and validate in your operation this weekend. Plus, listen to exclusive bonus content just for you. Connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram at Turning the Table Podcast. If you found value in this episode, please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. Give us a star rating. It helps other hospitality professionals just like you find the show. Or better yet, grab the show link and share it with a friend or colleague who you want to see succeed. Thanks for stepping in and speaking out for an industry, craft, and fraternity that serves us all. Remember, retention is the new cool, y'all. This podcast was written, directed, and produced by me, Adam Lamb, and Jim